I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. I'm calling to order the Beverly School Committee regular meeting. Today is Wednesday, May 13th, 2020. We are meeting virtually today using a remote meeting application that provides no cost to our district. And with BevCam, we have them broadcasting and recording our meeting as well as YouTube. This is allowed per the Governor's March 12th, 2020 order entitled Order Suspending Certain Provisions of the Open Meeting Law under Law 30A, Section 20. This order suspended the need for a quorum to be physically present as well as the chair to be physically present to host an meeting. It asks our body to use technical methods to allow access, which we've endeavored to do this evening. As I mentioned, we are being broadcast right now on Channel 99. And
this meeting is being recorded.
I don't know if you just heard that. So again, this is the regular Beverly School Committee meeting of Wednesday, March 13th, 2020. I am also recording a backup version on my local hard drive as a backup in case we have any service interruption with BevCam, who is broadcasting on Channel 99 and streaming on their YouTube channel. In case there's any interruptions, I would encourage to drop your video feed to try to at least reestablish the audio feed. I know that our internet service provider here in Beverly certainly seeing a lot more activity lately. That's the best hint I have for you. If things start to get choppy, just drop the video for a moment. Joining us today are school committee members, invited guests. Our invited guests relate to some agenda topics, and we have various members of the district administration who are also joining us from leadership teams to complement our agenda. I'm going to do a full roll call so that we have an attendance in just a moment. Through the use of the remote meeting technology and with BevCam's help, we are attempting to provide public access, which also could include public participation. Tonight, we encourage members of the public to contact us to have them participate. But as of right now, and Ms. Donna Bergeron can tell me if I'm wrong, I don't believe we have any requests to participate from the public. I will call that again in a moment.
Yeah, no, we have not.
Okay. As a preliminary matter, I would like to ask Ms. Bisnick if she would continue to assist me with the technology, specifically watching for people to be recognized by the chair in case they are not visible on my screen. We have a number of participants and they're not always all visible on my monitor. So I thank Ms. Bisnick in advance for her specific support watching for those hands. What we found works best is an actual hand in front of the camera, although the application does have a hand raise function as well. That should put a little hand next to your name on my attendee list. If you do have a connection and need to rejoin, I do ask that you make sure that your name is displaying. And I'm looking at our participants, and I think I recognize every name of our participants. So thank you so much for ensuring that is visible. I would ask us not to use the chat functionality at all this evening because it does become part of the public record. If you do lose audio for any reason, that would be an appropriate use of the chat functionality, but otherwise, please do use the convention of a hand raise to be recognized. Also, along those lines, please do keep yourself on mute to avoid background noise, and I appreciate that most people have headsets that will help us keep the audio as clear as possible. I have to warn you that any audio or video that you do supply tonight will become part of the official meeting record. So do keep that in mind. Just like we have a mute for our microphones, we also have the ability to turn off our video cameras at any time, especially since most of us are at home. Quite a few of us have little ones. If there's any interruptions and you wish to hide that video, please do so. Okay. Now I think we are ready to do our roll call. I want to make sure that we have all of our members recorded officially for the record. I saw Mayor Cahill join us.
Yep.
Okay. I understand that Ms. Coelho will be late because she's at a junior ROTC event. And I do believe I see Ms. Kelly Ferretti. I see Mr. John Milady. I see Ms. Karen Robinson. I see Ms. Lorinda Visnick. And I, Rachel Abel, am present. From our administration, I have Dr. Sue Chirocek. I see I saw Dr. Flaherty. There she is. Okay, you moved to the left on my screen. We have Ms. Jane Sherburne from our business office. Mr. John Harmond is joining us from our HR personnel. We have Ms. Bethany Splansky from our special ed and pupil personnel services. We have Ms. Christina Leal. There she is, big green C, from our food services department. We have Mr. Dana Krupchenk from our transportation department. I see Miss Julie Smith, one of our principals. I see Gabrielle Becky, another one of our principals at our elementary school. I see Miss Julia Brotherton. She's a high school teacher as well as our BTA president. And who am I missing? I see Megan Hart, who is our upcoming AIRS principal. And anyone else? I see BevCam, obviously.
Mr. Ailes.
Oh,
Mr. Ailes and our two distinguished guests.
Our two distinguished guests. Our invited guests this evening are House Representative Jerry Paracella and our State Senator Joan Lovely. We are so excited to have you with us. Our supporting materials for tonight's meeting were distributed to members in an email thread, and for those members of the public, they will be provided along with our meeting records on our beverlyschools.org website in a timely manner. As a final reminder to all of us, we do have to take roll call votes since we're meeting virtually, and at the appropriate times we'll be doing so. First agenda item is always our Pledge of Allegiance, and I'm going to try to share my pitiful flag and ask Ms. Visnick to start us off, and then we'll hear from Senator Lovely and Representative Paracella. So please join Ms. Visnick and myself. Oh, you've muted yourself, Ms. Visnick.
I went the wrong way, sorry. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty
and justice
for all. And our chorus kids are all doing that every week. They're figuring out how to enter or use the internet lag time to somehow come together. Okay.
Yeah,
well,
sorry, I didn't do a good job there.
That's
sorry.
All right. That's all right. So yes, it is our pleasure to have joining us this evening Senator Lovely and Representative Paracella. I don't know if either of you wanted to go first, but this is really an opportunity for you to share with us some of the thoughts in this unprecedented time. Don't all go. I don't know.
I'm going to unmute.
Okay.
I'm happy to go first.
Sure.
That's okay. I'm just going to bring up some notes. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to come this evening and present to you virtually, just to kind of give you an update. Before I begin, kind of just a quick overview of where we are with budget. I wanted to say thank you. Thank you. Today was a joint committee on education oversight hearing on remote and distance learning. Beverly Public Schools was one of the 3 schools that were selected to come in to speak and offer the overview of what's going on in Beverly. And I was able to have a great conversation with Superintendent yesterday about everything as well. So that gave me a great foundation. And I will tell you that the parent from the middle school, Christine O'Neill, and Megan Sudak, the teacher at Beverly High, and Principal Montevecchi from Hannah Elementary, did an outstanding job. I got a lot of really positive feedback, just what's going on in Beverly schools and the fact that really it's investments that have been made in the school system going back a decade that are now had put this foundation in place so that when we were faced with this pandemic and schools were shut down, Beverly was really prepared to do distance learning because of these, everything that's been put into place over the last 10 years and probably beyond. The investment in Beverly schools, it really is shining through now. Congratulations to everyone. I know there's a lot more work to do, but You are very well prepared to be able to be teaching our students, as educators, everything that they're doing, together with parents and families, and just the support system is just amazing. So I just want to say, very proud moment for me as the vice chair of the education committee to be able to watch this today. There were great questions from the chairs of the committee, from myself. It really was a shining moment for Beverly. So congratulations. So proud to be able to represent my hometown. And so great job, everyone. Really great job for everybody who was able to view this hearing today. It really was a really shining moment for Beverly. So let me shift gears quickly to budget and just tell you what we're talking about on the Senate side. And I know Representative Carosella will share with you what's happening on the House side. So, back in December, we do a revenue forecasting, and that tells us what we meet with economists and budget analysts, and that tells us what we should anticipate for revenue, how much we can increase the state budget by, what that's going to look like as far as local aid, Chapter 70, all the supports that come down of local communities. We did that back in December. We were looking at a modest 2.7% increase, and that's what Governor Baker built his budget on, and he released in January. Well, come end of February, now middle of March, we know what happened. And really a couple of weeks ago, the House would have done their budget, and the Senate would be in budget next week. And neither the House nor the Senate have formulated a budget yet. We actually just a little over 2 weeks ago did another consensus revenue hearing. Now, what does it look like now with the loss of billions of dollars in tax revenue between sales tax, hotel motel tax, gas tax, income tax with people being laid off, so what does that look like? And we're losing billions of dollars every month in revenue that we depend on. So we did this revenue forecasting just under 3 weeks ago, and for this fiscal year, it looks like we're going to be just under $1 billion shortfall, maybe about upwards of $900 million shortfall that we need to make up, because we either that or we go through a very painful process of 9 C cuts through the governor, and it's really too late in the year to be able to even make that happen, nor does anybody want to. So we are going to be borrowing that money under what they call a RANS, which is a revenue anticipation note, notes, to be able to borrow that money to be able to keep this fiscal year 20 whole, so we don't have to go through any last minute painful cuts. And the money that will pay that back will be from the income taxes that will be coming in July 15th and over the summer. That's how those RANS notes will be paid back. But looking at the FY21, the budget analysts are predicting we're going to have about a $5 billion shortfall for FY21. So what does that mean? So on the Ways and Means Committee, the chairs took a look. They went back 10 years to the 09-10 budgets. So we had the Great Recession in 08, 9, and 10 were those very lean years. And so they modeled after that. And what does that look like? So back then, it was a $4.6 billion shortfall, but over 2 fiscal years. This is a $5 billion shortfall in 1 fiscal year, much more challenging. So what does that look like? Well, Mayor Cahill is on the line. I can see him right there. He'll remember this. Hi, Mayor. That was almost a 29% cut to local aid. And we've never been able to bring those numbers back in the decades since to what they were pre-recession. But Chapter 70 was held harmless back then, but there were major cuts to special education. It was over 40% cut to special ed. There was over a 30% cut to school transportation. So that's the model that they're looking at. How do you fill that $5 billion gap? There's a couple of ways. to assist towards that. One is we have a very healthy rainy day fund, which is almost $3.5 billion, probably the best we've had in the Commonwealth in quite some time. You can't just empty that account out. That is how we get our bond rating and how we're able to borrow money. Remains to be seen, and I have not heard any particulars on what type of withdrawal from that could be made. Also, the legislature and administration are communicating with the federal government, with our congressmen and women and senators, U.S. senators, about a bailout. We don't know what that looks like yet either. So there's a couple of opportunities to make up that shortfall. We don't have that information yet. So and then I'm not sure what the representative is hearing on the House side. I'm sure he'll share that with us. But I'll tell you, this is what we're having discussions on the Senate side right now. One thing that will happen, or that they're talking strongly about doing, is doing a joint budget, whereas the House and Senate will put a budget out together. They won't have separate budgets. It'll be pretty lean. There won't be any earmarks or anything. But they're looking at trying to formulate a joint budget. And if we don't have a budget passed by July 1 or June 30th for July 1, then we would go into an interim budget, a month to month, or in sections. Again, we don't know yet. Ways and Means in the both House and Senate are working very closely with the administration, the A&F secretary, governor's office, governor, and lieutenant governor to try to formulate this. So that's where we are at from the understanding that I have from the Senate side. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. Please know that we're working very closely together with our communities. We're in constant conversations with Beverly, again, with your superintendent. I've talked to many of you on the school committee, and certainly with the mayor, who is a very strong leader to be able to lead us through this difficult time. So I will stop there and turn it over to my counterpart, Representative Parasola. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lovely.
Great, thank you, and great job and great overview. So I won't repeat what you said, but first let me just also thank everybody for all the work you're doing. I mean, I know how difficult it is. I'm a parent of a high school sophomore, so seeing the challenges that it is for the students, the teachers, the administrators, and I'm just really impressed with the performance of everybody in the district. And as the senator said, at the hearing today at the State House, Beverly looks great, and we really appreciate all you're doing. We did have a conference call today with most of the House members to kind of go over a lot of the things that Senator Lovely was talking about. And of course, the budget is the huge issue. Normally, we would take up the budget the week after school vacation, so around the last week of April. Normally, that's when we would vote on the budget, debate it and vote on it, and we haven't even presented a budget yet because there's just so much uncertainty. Unlike the federal government, the state has to have a balanced budget, so we're trying to figure out exactly where we are fiscally. And as the senator said, there's a large shortfall projected for next fiscal year. So most likely it'll probably be one of those 1/12 budgets in July to carry us through the beginning of the fiscal year. I wish I could give you more certainty on what Chapter 70 funds are going to come to Beverly and special ed, but it's just so much uncertainty right now. It's really hard to say. We are going to vote on a IT bond bill next week, and we think that could provide grants to cities and towns. There's a $25 million provision in there for grants for cities and towns to boost up their IT, which is so important as we have everybody having these virtual meetings and virtual classrooms and so forth. So we are anticipating voting on that next week. And then, hopefully you can get that to the governor sometime. And I know the governor is pushing hard for this, and so that we can perhaps provide some grants to cities and towns to help bolster your IT capabilities. There's just so much uncertainty right now. The governor is going to unveil his reopening plan on Monday. It's really, I'm hearing from a lot of business folks, just wondering what can they do, when can they do it. So I think just obviously reopening the economy is so vital to how that'll impact our revenues next year. Resources that we were getting this year, like for example, the casinos aren't open. We had 17,000 people file for unemployment claims in February, and now we're up to over 800,000. So just an unprecedented, incredible jump that we've never seen in the history of our Commonwealth. So it's just, unfortunately, I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but it's just a difficult time right now for so many. So we're doing all we can to try to, get information back to the mayor, back to the city council, back to you folks, when we get it. And that was a discussion that we had today was, just trying to get information as quickly as we can to you folks so you can make your decisions on the local level. But there's just a lot of uncertainty. So that's why I wish I could give you more clarity on what it looks like, but it's just difficult to do at this point. And I do, as the senator said, we're here to help you any way we can. And please feel free to reach out and contact my office if there's anything that we can do. And again, really, really appreciate all the work that you folks are doing. Thank you.
Thank you both. Thank you both for all of your effort and for reaching out to us to be a part of this meeting. Uncertainty. I think that's the key word of the evening. Along the same line, we did ask our city finance director, Brian Ailes, to join us to give us a view from the municipal side, what we're looking at. And Brian, there you go. I don't know if you had anything to present or you just want to give us a sort of a quick overview.
Yeah, first I just want to thank Representative and Senator Lovely for their presentation. It's very helpful to keep these lines of communication open to us all as we're trying to build this budget at a local level. As problematic as the news is, the more information we get, the more likely we are to make the appropriate decisions when we're building our budget. So thank you. I would just like to say that, the mayor and I, for the last month or so, since those revenue consensus hearings state level took place, have been diligently going line by line through our revenue sources, both what we expect from the state, but also at a local level, because we have some local revenue streams that will also be impacted by this pandemic. So invite the mayor to chime in at any point with some of the comments here that I'm going to roll through. But if it's okay with you, Madam President, I'd like to share a few slides that we could walk through in relatively short order here.
Yes, please do. I think you can grab the share.
Wonderful.
Great.
Okay. So I wanted to just highlight a few of the areas that at the city level we rely on every year that we know will adversely be affected by what's going on at the state and throughout the country. So the first one I have listed here is building permits. We've basically seen this spigot in terms of revenue be shut off. Once the pandemic really took hold and there was a lot of work from home orders, relatively no new building permits were being pulled at all. Even though we have the capability online, there are a few things that are getting done, but nowhere near the typical volume we see. So when we look forward to next year, we're anticipating roughly a 50% reduction in this revenue stream, which is similar to reductions that we've seen during past economic downturns. So we're trying to be mindful of the spending levels we're putting forth based on the historical data that we have to analyze. So we're expecting a 50% reduction there. The meals and room tax is really a wild card because for the last two recessions, which we have all our data from, we didn't have the local option in place for meals. So we really don't know how big of an impact this is going to be. I make it a point every time I go out to get takeout to ask the revenue owner, the restaurant owners, how they're doing, how much of their profits off, just so I get a sense of how big of an impact this really is to them. Right now, at this point in the budget building process, we're anticipating 80% reduction in meals and rooms tax for the first 2 quarters of the fiscal year, and then it begins to climb out of that. I mean, that's somewhat optimistic in hopes that we begin to open up our activity and begin to see those revenues which flow through the state and have about a quarter time frame lag until they come into the city. But that has an impact of about $365,000 reduction from FY20 levels. The state aid, which Senator Lovely and Representative Paracella spoke about, we looked at our last two recessions and know that in both cases, the first year that there were spending cuts to local aid or funding cuts to local aid, it hovered right around the 15% reduction level for us. And this is cumulative for all of our local aid sources, but it's very close, and I've got a chart that I'm going to show you to the 15% reduction. What Senator Lovely alluded to is that in the previous two recessions, there were also subsequent reductions that took place in subsequent years, bringing the cumulative reduction to over 20% in both cases. So this is one that, in hearing some of that news that Senator Lovely shared with us earlier, we may take a closer look at. This may be a little bit of an optimistic number. It may need to be a little bit more of a reduction. And then motor vehicle excise, of course, in this type of economy, people aren't out buying cars like they usually do. However, people still have their cars, so they will have excise bills next year, just at a reduced level. And historically, when we look at the numbers, it tells us that the largest one-year dip we've ever seen was a 15% reduction. So we would plug that in and anticipate that for the coming year as well. So those are kind of the bad news aspects of the budget. There are some pieces of it that are good, or at least help to offset some of these lost revenues. For instance, the property tax levy by law can go up 2.5%. That is a policy decision, both by what the mayor puts forth in his budget, as well as what the council may vote in terms of a funding level. But if we assume that there's a Prop 2.5 increase to the levy, that's $2.7 million in additional revenue that will go out in the form of tax bills. We also are counting on $1.2 million in new growth. Now, we're able to capture in next year's budget the new growth that occurred from July 1st of 2019 through June 30th of 2020. So for effectively 3/4 of the fiscal year, the economy was continuing to hum at the rate it was. So we know that there is significant new growth that we will be able to capture next year. What really worries me is when we look beyond next year, because the muted activity we're seeing now will have an effect on the FY22 new growth figures for us here. So we are building that into our multi-year modeling as well. And yes, I did say multi-year modeling because I'm going to get to this in a second, but it's really important that we look at this in terms of multiple fiscal years in order to develop a pathway out of this with the least amount of pain to our service levels, to our staff, to our constituents. And then there's some other areas that are adjusted as well, bringing the total new money to expect next year as of today, and again, this could change a little bit, is about $220,000 in new money. Now that's a $135 million budget, and we're looking at $220,000 in new money. So you can see the percentage of revenue increase is about 0.15%. So it's relatively insignificant in the grand scheme of things. Now, what I did want to just lay out for you real quick is, in that environment, we still have these fixed costs that we're either legally or contractually obligated to increase every year. So when we look forward to next year, we know there's a series of obligations that we simply must meet. So we know, for instance, our pension is going up by $561,000 next year. Fortunately, our debt payments are scheduled to come down. We have some debt falling off, and we haven't yet brought on the full debt payments for the middle school. And we haven't brought on the debt payments related to the police station because we're just starting that construction. Well, we started a few months ago, but that has yet to be borrowed. And then we also have existing contract obligations for city employees, and we have healthcare costs that are scheduled to go up. That
Mr. Hills?
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but could you just give folks a sense of when we do the borrowing for the last piece of the middle school and the police station, what the dollar amount's likely to be in the range of?
Yeah, so the plan that we're currently working with is we've got one more short-term borrowing, which will bring us through the third quarter of FY21. At that point, assuming that MSBA can close up their audit process on the middle school, we'll do our final borrowing, which will basically set a mortgage with scheduled payments from that point forward. The increase in debt expected from those two borrowings, the police station and the middle school, are about $2.5 million in additional costs that will occur annually. And unfortunately, that's right in the middle of this crisis. So we're keeping that in mind when we're looking at funding levels of all department spending, reserve levels, all of the pieces that make up this puzzle that we need to navigate through. Does that answer your question, Mr. Mayor?
Yes, thank you.
Sure. Also, we need to account for the expected increases in state assessments. We're going by the governor's proposal at this point until we see a revised version of the budget through the Ways and Means processes. And then I left here the two that are still somewhat unknown because they haven't been discussed here, but the school estimated employee contract obligations as well as healthcare. And I put those two here with effectively nothing else, and I know there's more to be discussed, but these are here because they're effectively either legal or contractual obligations that we simply must meet. So I put them here as just a placeholder for now. But you can see with rising costs and decreasing revenues that it's creating this large imbalance that's really becoming evident. So as we look at building the budget, we are looking out 3 to 4 fiscal years because we know that there are spikes in costs that will occur eventually at certain points in time. And we know that there are expected fluctuations in revenue that we can reasonably predict based on historical activity. And so to give you a sense of what I'm talking about when I say multiple year, I want to throw up a slide that Senator Lovely alluded to. This is the local aid funding levels for the city of Beverly over the last 2 recessions. So the most recent recession, or the Great Recession as they call it, is the orange line. And the one in the early 2000s is the blue line. And you can see, if you can see my cursor, I don't know if you can see that, but you can. Okay, you can see at year 0, basically that's the funding level that came in year 0, basically. The first year that there were spending cuts, the funding levels dipped by 14.3% in one instance and 15.6% in the other instance. So you can see why it's reasonable for us to predict roughly a 15% reduction in state aid based on this data. What's more difficult to predict is how quickly the rebound will occur, whether it's a sharp rebound, whether it's more of a U-shaped like the Great Recession shows here, and whether or not there will be further impact to revenues at the state level that may cause further reductions in subsequent years. So we need to make sure we're planning for those as well. So overall in our modeling, what we're doing is we're taking a 15% reduction and assuming that in year 1, FY21. And then in FY22, we're taking an additional reduction because we know that there may be some lingering effects to the economy as a result of this very high unemployment levels and the spending that will occur both from a sales tax perspective, but also income tax, capital gains tax, corporate tax. All of those are going to be affected, we know. And some of those have a delayed effect when we talk about how they are registered at the state level. Excuse me, at the state level. So we're really trying to plan through this. One other note that is important here is even after year 3, which is really the bottom of the last 2 recessions, you can see that funding levels began to climb back out. But even after year 6, they still weren't back to the levels where they were pre-recession. So we need to both be looking at how to kind of fill some holes in the revenues, but also how do we readjust our spending levels to get them better in line with our anticipated revenues out multiple years. And that's something we've been doing a lot of work on with our department heads, and hopefully we'll begin those discussions here this evening a little later with Dr. Chirocek. So I wanted to show you that. And then I also wanted to just put on here as a placeholder, I did this last minute, that we are very, very, as concerned as we are with FY21, we're even more concerned with FY22 because we know that the state aid levels will not rebound immediately. They'll take a dip and they're either going to stay there for a little bit, maybe a slight fluctuation up or down in FY22. So once we get that cut, it's basically there for a little while. And what's really got us worried is we know, and the mayor alluded to this in his question about the debt, that we will take on significant more costs in FY22 than we will have in FY21. And I've just on the back of an envelope here outlined over $5 million in additional costs that will come on in FY22 that we know about. The debt, we absolutely have to get it on the books, and we're obligated to pay it. We've authorized the projects, we've done the projects. By that point, we'll have done the police station. So we need to get that debt on the books. Pension, that's a legislative mandate, funding by 2040. So we got to keep rolling on that schedule. Healthcare, we know as much as we try, there's always cost increases related to healthcare. This sanitation cost line is one that I put a question mark next to because we're scheduled to renegotiate our sanitation contract. That includes both the transfer station costs, picking up curbside, and recycling. And we know what the market's doing in terms of recycling, and we are expecting, based on what we're hearing from other communities that are going out to bid and our sanitation experts, Sharon Kashida, that these costs are expected to really ramp up during the next contract negotiation to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then I also wanted to leave some earmarks here, which are obviously necessary costs related to the schools. So I kind of took some liberty here. I hope they're close to what Gene can probably chime in if they're not, but I know Steps and Columns typically runs about $700,000 a year. So I've put that in there. And then I just wanted to give you all a perspective on what a COLA at 1% would cost. Okay, so this is just to give you a sense. For city and school, it's about $750,000 if we did it across the board at 1%. So I just put that as a placeholder again. If it's 2, it'd be 1.5. So we need to make sure we're building all this into our modeling as well. And that's really all I had for slides. So you might have to help me. How do I get this?
There's a stop share. It's a red button, probably at the bottom of the dock.
There we go.
There you go.
So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. I will just add, Mayor Cahill, you might want to talk to this a little more than I this evening, but we are preparing a budget to be submitted. We're working hard to get those numbers in line. It's not an easy task. We're working minute by minute, hour by hour into the hours of late nights with our department heads to try to be creative about realigning spending and adjusting what it is are the core services we're trying to deliver and how best and most efficiently can we meet that with reduced spending levels. Ultimately, and this is kind of a personal statement here, is I've been through both of these recessions in a seat similar to this, and I've had to do layoffs in both situations. One was at the state level in the early 2000s, and we laid off an entire division of the Department of Revenue. The second time I was at a much smaller agency, and we worked more closely with each other, and it's one of the most difficult, painful things I've ever had to do. And I've said to the mayor from get-go in these discussions, it's my hope and my goal through all of this that we make the right decisions so that we're not impacting families that both work for the city and that are receiving services from the city. We need to be mindful of that. And so when the opportunity comes to really scrutinize spending, we've got to make the difficult decisions sometimes, and sometimes say no to some spending because we know it down the road may have an impact to how much service we're able to deliver. So I'll stop there and open it up to any questions someone may have.
Thank you, Mr. Ailes. Mayor Cahill, I saw your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Ailes. Just a couple of add-ons to the conversation. In the last several days, there's a group of mayors that are together a few times a week, and we met with Governor Baker the other night, and we met with Senate President Spilka today. We're supposed to be meeting with the House Speaker Speaker DeLeo on Friday. And I'll just say, for all our benefit and also for the Senator and Representative, and thank you both for being with us and all you do. Both the Governor and the Senate President have expressed the desire to get some clarification to us all as soon as possible on a local aid number. Now, what that means timing-wise, I'm not sure. We, as a group of mayors, have made it clear to them that we are all planning to go forward and pass budgets by June 30th. None of us are looking to do 1/12. We're all looking to pass our budgets, and we're just asking them, give us the most accurate number you can, and we'll work with it. Now, there is one variable there that, I don't want to sound overly hopeful, but there are efforts at the federal level to send money directly to cities and towns to replace lost revenue. Whether or not that happens, I think you all, if you were paying attention, I know you probably all were, in the last round of the CARES Act, the House tried to push that through, the Senate fought it. It didn't happen. So this is round 3 of CARES Act, I believe, and the House is looking for, I think, $250 billion to cities and towns directly, and some additional significant sum to states. So there's a possibility that there will be some money that helps to this end. I don't know what timing is meant to be on that, and it could also not come. So, the state knows or should I say, the state is doing their best to project out the way we're trying to project out revenues. And I know that leadership in the House, Senate, and the Governor all want to try to give us some clarity as soon as they can. One other point, since Mr. Ailes showed the projected increase in pension payments for FY21 and 22, Mr. Ailes, if you can remind me, it was in like 475 range for 21 and about 500 for 22.
560.
Oh gosh, so hovering around or over $500,000 increase each year, and that's because of the requirement, the federal and state requirement that we fully fund our pension system. We are asking, as a lot of leaders have been asking from the local level to the state level, can we get some relief from those increases? There's no real magic number for what year that our pension system needs to be fully funded. It ebbs and flows with the economy. It has several times in the time I've been watching. Certainly in the 2 recessions that we've been talking about, we've seen everybody have to readjust as the pension funds have dealt with the stock market, and as municipalities have had challenges in funding. So if there's an ability, Senator and Representative, just know that we're asking legislative leadership, and we'll ask you as well. I know you're both in leadership. If there's a way to give some relief to those pension payments, just to let us put a little less in each year over the next few years, maybe push out by a couple of years the total payoff. That's another way that we could find some relief in the near term. So thank you for that. Madam President, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill. I think I saw a couple hands earlier. Are there other questions, comments? I'm not seeing any hands now. Okay, well, thank you all for that reality check, and we appreciate the sentiments too, that keeping the communications open. We will have some very hard decisions in front of us, and working together, hopefully we can, put our families first. I think, Mr. Ailes, you really, brought something to the table with your comments right at the end there. Thank you. Okay. Well, I very much appreciate our distinguished guests for joining us this evening. We do have a full slated agenda this evening. We have a little bit of housekeeping to take care of, but then we will have Dr. Chirocek present from a school perspective some budget updates. You're welcome to stay. If you need to drop off, we do understand. And we thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, looking to our agenda, our next order of business is the approval of our meeting records from our meeting of April 8th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as reported?
So moved.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill. And I see Mr. Mulady is giving us a second. I will call the roll again for sake of recording it. I'm going to do it alphabetically again, if that's all right. No objections to that. So Mayor Cahill?
Yes.
Thank you. Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Thank you. Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
Thank you. John Mulady?
Yes.
Thank you. Karen Robinson?
Yes.
Thank you. Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
Thanks. And Rachel Abel, yes. 7-0, we've approved our meeting records, so those can be published. Thank you. At this time, I'm going to pause and ask Ms. Bergeron if anyone has reached out to her via interwebs to ask to join our meeting. We did slate an open forum for citizen concerns or to provide input on any of the agenda related items.
No, I've not had anybody email me.
Okay. Well, we tried, and similar to our in-person meetings, we don't usually get people jumping up and down for that. We will continue to endeavor to provide an opportunity for public speak at our regular meetings, as well as our upcoming public hearings. So thank you so much for getting that out there. The next item is a group of items by consensus. On your agenda, you'll see items A, B, C, and D. These represent warrants that are moving through for approval. Can I have a motion to approve this group A, B, C, and D?
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. And a second?
Second.
I see a second. Oh, I saw Kimberly Coelho had a second first, and thank you also, Ms. Ferretti, covered there. Again, for the sake of efficiency, I'm going to read the roll in alphabetical order. Mayor Cahill?
Yes.
Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Thank you. Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
John Mulady?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. 7-0, we have passed the items by consensus. And now, Dr. Chirocek, thank you so much for preparing some informational items for us. I'll let you share as you see fit.
All right, thank you. There we go. And again, and I believe that both Representative Parasella and Senator Lovely may have stepped out of the meeting, but I wanted to thank them as well for both for a number of things, but for attending and sharing information with us and for the opportunity that we had earlier today with the Senate hearing. So I am sharing with you a just sort of a few slides. I mean, I think this has sort of become my way of kind of working through the superintendent's report with all of you as we go. I have, I think we all listened very intently to both Senator and Representative Parasella and to Brian, and understand that we face some real challenges as we move forward. So tonight I have a quick update for you on the budget. I will walk through some of the things that we're talking about, and then I have an update on some of the school closure items as well. So I'm probably going to be more brief than I have been in the past few meetings, so hopefully that will help our meeting end a little shorter. The first item that, well, I don't want to repeat this. This I had put in. I wasn't quite sure exactly what Senator Lovely and Representative Parasella were saying, but this just echoes that, we understand that the House Ways and Means have not created their budgets, and that they may create a joint budget. So in light of that, Jean and I have continued to meet regularly with the mayor and with Bryant to review the municipal finances and the forecast for city contribution. We've been working closely with them. I appreciate greatly. I don't think I can overstate the efforts and the communication with Bryant. He brings a lot of information to me as a new superintendent that I am listening very carefully to and taking into consideration as we work to try to draft a budget and continue, as a good partner with the city in terms of how we are working through that. One of the things that we needed to talk about was a revised timeline. Specifically, tonight was supposed to be our public hearing, given the closure and the uncertainty around funding and the inability to kind of get all of our information together. We had postponed that. I think that it's incumbent upon the committee to think about how we will get back on track. I do believe in my conversations with the mayor that they would like to present their budget at least sometime in early June. So I think in our conversations, we felt like a school committee vote on the school budget by June 2nd would probably be the latest date that we would be able to get that to him for him to be able to follow through and do that. So there are a couple of dates that I'm throwing out there. I think you're going to have to discuss this together. We have currently an F&F meeting scheduled for May 20th. Jean and I, in doing sort of the counting backwards to make sure that we can post documents and follow all of the things that we have to do in compliance for a public hearing, are thinking that perhaps May 27th might be a date. It could be May 28th. May 27th is, I think, a meeting that was originally scheduled as a committee of the whole. So that's just something that we need to address in terms of how we move forward. So Madam President, I don't know if you want to have that as a conversation right now, or if you want to wait, we can do that at another time later.
Let's wait till the end of the budget update, just so that people can be informed before we decide.
Okay. All right, great. So that's one of the items that we certainly want to make sure that we take a look at tonight. In terms of our projected budget options, first of all, I'm sure, as you remember, we were before everything closed down, we were in the midst of negotiations with our union, and I know Julia is listening in as well. We have actually connected and are working really hard to resume talks with them, that the talks that were suspended. We have a meeting for tomorrow to begin having those conversations. So it's an important piece for us in terms of our planning for budget. And we look forward to kind of getting those conversations back up and running tomorrow. Just as a reminder, our current budget is $61,017,942. And so, I mean, that's important to keep in mind in our conversations, hoping against hope for a level serviced plan that we can make sure that we can meet the needs of the students in the district, and yet 100% understanding the difficulties that we're all facing. And in our conversations, the city had estimated a 15% reduction in state funding. I think I heard Brian echo that again, though I think I also heard some reservation in his voice when he did it. So I think we all have to really, this is an ever-changing landscape. Just like when schools were initially closing, we're all sort of on pins and needles waiting for more guidance and always hoping to get more information. I think the mayor's statement that he's hoping that Friday he may get some insights. I think we're all really looking really hard to how we can hear what's happening and keep it going. So in our work, Jean and I, as Brian and the mayor are doing, I think we're spending 98% of every waking moment thinking about and looking at how we can make adjustments, make reallocations, do what we can do in order to preserve. So here's another challenge. None of us really know what school is going to look like on September 3rd. We're preparing this budget with an eye to a brick and mortar delivery of service, much like we have in the past. But I think we all know that that's an ever-changing decision. And so we are waiting to hear guidance on what summer will look like. And then when we finish hearing and planning for summer, guidance on what that reopening of our schools will entail. Will it be a traditional brick and mortar where kids report to school daily? Will it be some hybrid model where, we have to alternate the number of students that we can have in the building? Or will we be opening once again in the same mode that we're in right now with a remote learning model? So, all of those things are weighing heavily on me as I look at trying to prepare a budget. Each one of those scenarios is going to bring different costs, different challenges and obstacles, including different costs for us. So in the interest of moving forward and having a budget prepared, we are preparing as if we would be delivering school as we all kind of have our fingers crossed and hope we'll be able to deliver. And so that's sort of where we are in terms of that. I think I can stop there if you want and answer any questions that anybody may have, knowing that on September 20th, we'll be coming forward with much more detail and information around what we're looking at.
Okay, so just to restate, we would be looking to put forward a full year FY21 budget for a vote at the very beginning of June. And your recommendation is that we look at our May 20th date and possibly May 27th, 28th for going forward with presenting a full year budget and to the public, and then following that with our official vote to transfer that number to the mayor.
Correct.
Okay. Do we have any questions for Dr. Churchick based on the information that she's presented? And do we have questions? Do we want to make a plan for our remainder of May?
The mayor's hand is up.
Okay, I'm not seeing him, but Mayor Cahill, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, and when we met with the Senate President earlier, she was talking about hoping to have a number for us. And really, I mean, this is about the House, the Senate, and the governor's office being able to come to an agreement on a number. And when she said it today, she said she was hoping for the beginning of June. So I think, maybe we target these dates, and as we get closer to the 27th, we may still be waiting on a local aid resolution or something of the like from the state. And it may be that public hearing gets pushed off a week for that reason. They recognize that we all need to conduct our budget processes, and so there's time needed for the school committee and the school budget, and then there's time needed for the city council to do the overall budget. And we've got the whole month of June. So, it could be that they're able to give us a number sooner than the end of May, and that public hearing date can work. I think we just need to be flexible and know that, we'll be working between now and then to understand what the numbers look like and what we're projecting them out to be. And, if that's how it lands, this is how it'll happen and so forth. So it does seem that, do you want a motion on these dates to get us started?
Well, let's have a little bit more conversation and then maybe we'll make the motion. I saw Ms. Visnick raising her hand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, from a procedural point of view, would your goal, Dr. Churchick, be to add a committee of the whole, or to simply widen FNF to, in essence, make it a meeting of the whole?
So Rachel and I had talked a little bit about that. I know that you have some items and that FNF needs to address. Jean has some business that she needs to go to FNF with. So I think I was either thinking have the FNF that would then morph into a committee of the whole, or if you would, however you want to do it. But I do know that Jean does have some things that she needs to bring to FNF that then FNF would be recommending or forward to the committee of the whole. So I thought sometimes we do, hold the FNF meeting and then have the committee of the whole meeting. I thought maybe that evening we could maybe use that time that way. I don't know.
Right. Or I guess I think we can just post it as all of us being there, and then, instead of stopping one and starting the other. Right. Whatever. But
I do know there are some specific.
I don't mind.
Right. I do know there are some specific agenda items for FNF, and then there would be, the conversation and discussion for the committee of the whole. And this is an aggressive timeline, but in talking with the mayor earlier, he had mentioned that, he would like to be positioned if in fact we can have a vote, that he could go forward in early June. So I agree with him 100%, the flexibility, but having it, if we at least have it set, we can always delay it. Whereas if we don't have it set, we don't have a plan if in fact the dates do come forward. Is that, would you concur with that, Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Churchick.
Do we have any more questions for Dr. Churchick or for Mayor Cahill? Should we entertain a motion to make our May 20th meeting a committee of the whole at the conclusion of an FNF meeting? To add that, I don't really know if we need motions to add a meeting or not, but I'd definitely like consensus if people think that would be a productive use of our time to get more detailed budgetary information in case we do need to move forward with putting a budget out for public hearing.
Madam Chair. I'm sorry.
I would agree with that, President Abel.
Okay. I see a thumbs up from Mr. Milady. Okay.
I think that as a general rule of thumb, we usually have our budget discussions, quote unquote, first at FNF. And so that's why I just thought it would be, why present twice? So if we combined it and just had one meeting, or, if we declared FNF to be a meeting of the whole, then we could do our FNF business and then move right into the budget discussion, and the people on FNF could stay for that. They could leave if they so wanted. But if we declare it to be a meeting of the whole, then everyone will be allowed to speak, as opposed to not speaking when you're not on the subcommittee.
Mm-hmm. I believe City Council follows a similar practice as well. Ms. Sherburne, I see your hand. You're on mute, though. There you go.
I agree with Lavender on that. I would like to have it as a committee of whole and F&F if possible, combined. That way when the things I'm bringing forward then need to go to the full committee for vote, which would be primarily going to be transfers. So it probably would be best if we could have it as a joint meeting for that purpose.
Okay.
And I can talk to Ms. Visnick as far as, who we were planning on bringing. Quite honestly, it was buildings and grounds, which I'm not sure if, we may want to push that to June, but.
Okay. I don't see any other hands. Do we have any other questions about this? It seems like I've seen general consensus that making it a committee of the whole. Ms. Visnick, go ahead.
I'm just concerned for the people who are not on FNF if they have availability.
I'm sure they all have travel plans. Sorry.
Come on now.
No, that's a very valid point. We shouldn't assume that the members who aren't on the FNF committee. I know I can speak for myself. I'm not on that committee, and I don't have any plans next Wednesday. So
I'm available as well.
Thank you, Ms. Ferretti. And I think Mr. Belady, you'd be the other affected member. Oh, and Mayor Cahill.
I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good too.
Okay, great. So why don't we just go ahead? We have consensus that we will post next week's meeting as a committee of the whole so that we can get more detailed budget information all at the same time. And we'll take care of the FNF agenda items as well. Okay, and then I think what I'm hearing is that we should wait for further information before setting the absolute public hearing date, but practically we have to have so many days of having the documents posted. And so we will probably aim for the 28th, but potentially need to move that out just slightly. So we'll settle on that next week.
Rachel, we do have to have that advertised in the newspaper 7 days prior.
7 days, right.
Yes.
So that's why I'm thinking maybe we have to do the 28th. Rather than the 27th for our public hearing, so that we can physically get it to Salem News if we decide next week we're ready to put something forward. Okay. And so that would be a Thursday evening. Similarly, hopefully people might be able to make a swap in plans if we give back a Wednesday night for a Thursday night, but we'll tackle that next week. Okay. Were there any additional questions at this point for Dr. Churchuk? Because I believe we have another topic, the school closure updates. Okay, go ahead.
All right, so I'm actually going to invite, if that's okay with all of you, Gabrielle Montevecchi to join me in talking about. One of the things that we learned early on in this closure is that the number of tasks that needed to be addressed are quite a few, and so we've set up a little bit of structure within the leadership. Within the leadership team, where we've broken into task forces, and we have a task force, and one of the principals will lead a different task force for different topics. One of the areas of a challenge that we were facing and an obstacle for some of our families was connecting with the distance learning. And while I appreciate the sentiments of Senator Lovely about how well positioned we were because of our situation with the one-to-one iPad deployment at the middle school and the one-to-one iPad at the high school, we still had some challenges of devices and more another challenge around connectivity. So I had asked Gabrielle Montevecchi. She is also a member of the Human Rights Committee. So they have been working with us, and I know she has reached out to other community partners. So I'm going to turn it over to, by the way, she's been very busy today. So she testified in front of the House and the Senate, and now she's presenting to school committee. So she's really earning her keep today. But I'd like to invite Ms. Montevecchi to join us and walk us through what that task force has been doing and where we stand right now. So.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Torochek, for making time on tonight's agenda for this very important topic. We wanted to just give an overview as a task force, which includes Judy Miller and Steve Palomo, along with other leadership in the district. Give an overview about where we began after the closure in March with our device distribution for remote learning. Right away, in the middle of March, our IT department quickly assembled all of the Chromebooks that would need to go out to families. They did that just incredibly efficiently. And we were able to set up a weekend date, a Saturday, where families could come in and pick up Chromebooks if they did not have a device for their child at home at the elementary level. And in that initial date, each elementary building handed out between 8 and 10 Chromebooks. And since then, we have gone back and requested more Chromebooks from Michelle Newman and Steve Palomo to be prepared to go out to the elementary. And at this point, we have got 200 devices out in the hands of our elementary students. So initially, I think families were thinking this was going to be the short run. They could get their students up on phones, perhaps. I think very quickly everybody realized this was going to be a much longer closure and identified the fact that they did not have a device at home that their child could really do adequate work on. So attending to that need, we made sure to distribute flyers and contact families directly to provide them with all the information on the Comcast Internet Essentials package, which will provide families with free internet connection just till the end of June. That ends on June 30th. And that Internet Essentials information was all posted on the Beverly Keeps Learning site right away. That was all translated into all of the languages that are represented in our district so that everyone had access to that information. The tech department, as I said, got ready and prepared all those Chromebooks for that distribution. We know that at the middle school, students were able to come in and pick up the devices for those that are not kept at home in grades 5 and 6. And at the high school, 80 laptops were distributed to students who are not currently in the leasing program or did not have their own to use. During this school closure period, we've continually worked with teachers and our school adjustment counselors as we looked at usage. So across the different levels, we're identifying contact time with students interfacing with Google Classroom, getting on Google Meet. At the middle school, similarly, their attendance in Google Classroom, and at the high school, the use of the Moodle. And noticing very early on, there were children who were either not making contact or perhaps were showing up on classroom meetings on a parent's phone and not on a device. And in some cases, they were families for whom they had received a device and we still were not seeing that child present on an adequate Chromebook type device. So we worked closely to identify exactly what the barriers were for families. Find out what's happening. We're not seeing your child getting on or connecting regularly. And what we were finding when we had those individual conversations with parents were that families were reporting just tremendously challenging wait times, getting online, calling that 1-800 number. And we all know as parents, what it's like to try to hang on hold with a very young child at home or multiple children at home, try to get across to get somebody to hook up. And, of course, for many families, they have a need for translation. And in quarantine, families who may have relied on a next door neighbor or friend to assist with translation cannot do that at this time. So without getting someone live on the phone to help facilitate translation, it became tremendously challenging. And then we had this, catch-22 situation we were hearing about, which was the documentation that was needed for application to the Internet Essentials package. It's got to be uploaded. So unless you're accessing internet, you can't upload that form. So we'd come back to square one, which could be quite a challenging situation. So the task force worked together to identify some solutions for families. And I want everyone to know that all of the personnel at every single school building continues to work with individual families in getting signed up for Internet Essentials if that's what they would like to do, because that is a more high-speed connection. And that after the free package ends, that people will continue to be able to access that service for $10 a month. And we'll keep working on that with individual families, as I said. The Comcast call center, we've been in touch with a number of executives at Comcast and Comcast local outreach, and they are working really hard to make their call center more efficient. Call times have died down, actually, as time has moved on. And they've had more personnel attending to the needs. They're assuring us that they're really trying to make it more user-friendly and they're able to move those applications a lot quicker. We were essentially looking for an easy button for families so that we could sort of override that process and just give them a go on getting hooked up with that package. We also investigated the option with T-Mobile to disperse hotspots. And right now, the hotspots essentially are able to be sent to schools with no cost for the device. And the families, there'd be a cost essentially for the hotspots of $20 a month. And what we love about the hotspot is that it's totally flexible. There's no technical setup that goes with the hotspot. You just plug it in. And for our families who do not have a permanent address or may need to move quickly, you simply unplug your hotspot and take it with you wherever you need to use it. It's not as fast a connection as the Comcast product is. However, it would enable multiple users in a family to get online efficiently. We do like the fact that, for those families who are currently in shelter, Wi-Fi can be a tremendously challenging thing. Not all the shelters provide Wi-Fi for a number of very good reasons, because it's very difficult to keep secure in some cases. The hotspots actually have some built-in security measures, which would be important for children. And again, they're flexible. You take them anywhere you need to go. So it makes learning on the spot able to happen if they've got a device and a hotspot. Currently, the school adjustment counselors are working with families who remain without access to Wi-Fi, and we see those numbers steadily decreasing because we're working very hard on a case-by-case basis to move through those barriers. We have a spreadsheet going right now across all the schools to collect information on exactly how many households are affected by this issue, and working to find the very best solution for families right now, because we do not want any more lost learning time for children. And we're also looking ahead to what the best long-term solutions are, knowing that we could well face, whether we go back to school or not in the fall, it's very likely we will face future shutdowns, and we want to be well prepared for that. So that's just a brief overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions. We also are working with partners in the community. Beverly Bootstraps has come forward and wanting to know how they can help, and wanted to hear some of our thinking around the issue. And I know that Dr. Trochek recently had a conversation with citywide PTO as well, so I'll let her share a little bit on that front, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee has.
So I would just echo that I spoke not only with citywide PTO, but I know that we're reaching out on behalf of BevEd. BevEd, was hoping to lend a hand and do what they can. So I think, one of the things that we're facing is trying to figure out a sustainable solution for this. It's easy, especially, I think we would prefer if we can get people hooked up to Comcast and they can remain sustainable. But then as we uncovered the different barriers for some of our families with Comcast, we knew that we needed some, another secondary solution as well. So I think our idea right now is to do both, right? If in fact we can get a family set up with Comcast, that's a more permanent solution for them, and more helpful. Our work with Bootstraps was phenomenal. Our goal with working with them primarily was to have them help us in reaching out to families, because they, as a powerful organization within the city. They have great connections with a lot of our families, and they were, we're hoping that they would be able to continue to connect us, as well as, we've had it in conversations thinking we're addressing families with school-age children, but there may be families in the community that don't have school-age children that are facing some similar challenges around Wi-Fi. And given that we're all sort of in our homes and, that's a challenge. So thinking about ways to do that. In terms of funding, we're always happy to engage with partners from the community if they're interested in working with us on funding. We're certainly not going to let that stop us at this point. But again, thinking more sustainable, how could we set up some sort of an option where, over time we're able to continue to offer this, because we know that education, the way that we're delivering education has changed forever. Even no matter what we face in September, there's always going to be a reliance and a need to help families become connected and as they go forward. So, again, many thanks to Gabrielle and her team, Judy Miller, Steve Palomo, Michelle Newman, Sue Gabriel, Sally, it's Hunter, I think, all of that. They've all been instrumental in making this work, the support of the Human Rights Committee as well. So we continue to tackle this on an ongoing basis. We hope to have, those hotspots in as soon as we get them. We'll be dispersing them out. So the other good thing about the hotspots is a family could use it for 3 months and then return the device, and we could give it to a different family for 3 months or 6 months or for however long they needed it. So that flexibility is also really important. So any questions for Gabrielle? Or?
I see Ms. Bisnick has her digital hand raised.
Thanks. So I have a series of questions. Maybe I'll just say them all, and then you can, if you want me to repeat one of them, you can. And whoever wants to answer them can answer them. The first one is around what did the city of Salem do relative to an agreement with Comcast? It's my understanding, right, they've made some social media posts about having an agreement, and that kind of ties into my next question, which is around funding. So in the city of Salem, they're actually offering to pay the bill for any family that needs connectivity. And I believe that the way they did that was because they worked some deal with Comcast. So I'm wondering if we can't try to negotiate a very similar deal, if not the same deal. And relative to the funding, I feel like despite the terrible news we heard from everybody at the beginning of this meeting, if we need our families to have a connection to be able to be participating in education, then we should be paying that bill. We, the city, the schools. I understand that maybe that's why you're reaching out to the community partners, but at the same time, if you look at our PTOs, I don't understand how, well, even if our PTOs are in session and have the ability to generate funds via their various fundraisers, they have their own budgets. So that the whole funding thing is a big red flag, I guess I'll say. And my last question has to do with the signal that we already have in each and every school, especially the high school. We have signals going in there, and it would seem that we could, BevEd tried to do a number of years ago, take the signal out of the high school after hours and quote unquote reroute it and put it into Gloucester Crossing as a hotspot. That equipment was purchased. The job was never done for a variety of reasons. But it seems like we should be able to do something similar. We as a city have a signal going into each of our 7 schools, and we should be able to, in essence, broadcast that signal out or redirect the signal and let people use it, because our schools are not using it, because almost no one's in our schools right now.
So let me first just start. I want to address the funding issue that you brought up. So we did not go out and solicit funding and say we can't do this unless we get funding. We were moving ahead to do this, and we had partners reach out to us and say, how can we help? are there areas that you can think of that we can help? So we are doing this regardless of whether any outside partners want to contribute and want to be partners with us in this effort. So that at no point did we go out soliciting funds and saying, oh my gosh, we can't afford to, provide internet services to our families and we need your help. We actually began the conversation with how do we navigate the corporate offices of Comcast to try to get ourselves positioned much in a way that Salem was able to do. So, I know Gabrielle can speak more to what Mayor Driscoll and the city, I think what they did. So just, I just want to be clear. We did not go out looking for partners just because we needed money. We really started our work with bootstraps because we were looking for help communicating with families and identifying who needed help and how we could best serve them and how we could reach them, and knowing that they have intimate connections with a lot of families who may need services that may not have reached out to us yet. So, I just want to dispel that. In talking with Citywide, I think the conversations evolved, and, there were people who were saying, how can we help? And as a matter of fact, within PTO was asking us on Friday morning. I met with the PTO presidents. We didn't do our field trips. We didn't do a lot of things. We've raised some money. How can we help? And so I'm always going to suggest to people great ways they can help whenever I think of any of them. So we ordered the hotspots. We are happy to do that. In terms of the situation with the mayor and what the city of Salem set up, Gabrielle, I think you can talk to that a little bit more.
Sure. Yes. So, Lorinda, you're right on. As the minute I saw that press release, we all, as a task force sort of jumped on that to find out, what was the magic bullet? What was this? What was the easy button that Mayor Driscoll facilitated there? And I reached out through Human Rights Committee, and I had a conversation through Catherine Barrett in the mayor's office, sort of finding out what that was. So we did investigate that. Much to your point, Lorinda, what Salem did was create a single pay situation for the district. So truthfully, and Salem's, numbers in this regard are not comparable in terms of family access at this point to our numbers. Our numbers are much, much lower, but they created a single pay situation. So the school district is taking on a bill that represents that number of households. And I want to assure you there was no deal in the making. I wish that I could say that there was some sort of a special COVID deal. We kind of thought there might be. Just give our students free Wi-Fi now, but unfortunately, it's not the case. It was really just a way to streamline things so that the school district would take on that sort of a single pay situation on behalf of those families, which I do think was the very best decision in that city, given the number of students. The other piece that we did discuss as a task force was broadband, and you spoke to some historical references around community hotspots, et cetera. I think it is definitely time to start investigating more long range solutions. Judy Miller has a lot of historical knowledge, and I'm sure the mayor can contribute some information on that as well. We were hearing stories today from communities in the western part of the state of students who are actually only able to access Wi-Fi by driving to their school's parking lot to do their learning. And it really made me step back and feel extremely fortunate for the ability that we have had to reach our most at-risk families. In large regard, we still have a long way to go. But I can't imagine trying to provide distance learning in any effective way if students had to, be charged with asking their parent to drive them to a school to access a hotspot. And absolutely true. We have been, approached by community partners who understand that this is really a human rights issue right now. And families are facing, so many barriers. And this Wi-Fi piece, I think it's important to understand there are some really intimate personal things happening in families related to finances that, come down to having personal relationships with certain people in school buildings to share and be, comfortable to trust and share those things. And it can be very sensitive. One piece we really love about that hotspot flexibility is that there's really It's up to the schools to know who needs what, when, where, why, and there isn't a need to have any sort of documentation provided, income verification, none of that. We just make sure the child gets what they need. So we do like that flexible option. For the long run, as Sue said, for families to continue to receive high-speed connection, Comcast is truthfully a better product. But exploring both right now seems the most prudent way to go, and we look forward to having those hotspots in our hands, relatively soon.
Thank you, Ms. Montevecchi, and thank you, Dr. Chirocek. Do I see any other hands from the committee members, or shall we move along on our agenda? We do have to entertain an executive session this evening, so I just want to be mindful of time as well.
I think Mrs. Robinson's raising her hand.
Oh, thank you. I don't see that on my screen. Ms. Robinson?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. Any idea of a number of students who are still without access or percentage? I'm sure you don't have an exact number, but roughly.
Sure. So what we've been doing is looking at numbers at the elementary level, and each elementary school is reporting 3 to 5 households at this time, with the middle school reporting between 10 and 12 and the high school reporting between 10 and 12. And that is students who are specifically, or their parents specifically identifying a very weak connection or no connection at this point. And what we've done with our school adjustment counselors is we've started to look at data to, ensure the fact that multiple households are represented across the grade levels.
Right.
So we're seeing the same, last name popping up that we can identify that family as a single household, et cetera.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Anyone else? Well, thank you again. Thank you both for that update.
Thank you.
All right, and again, Ms. Montevecchi, thank you very much for your very busy day. So you'll actually be mentioned in my next slide. I finally, I know that Senator Lovely and Representative Paracella, had described to all of you the opportunity that we had. I have to admit that I sat in my office virtually with tears streaming down my face. I was so in awe of your presentations that you made. My thanks for representing our city and our school district so well go out to Christine O'Neill, who's a 6th grade parent, Megan Sudak, our high school teacher, and again, Gabrielle Montevecchi. So I can imagine that testifying in front of the House and Senate would be daunting in a regular opportunity, and having to do it remotely on Zoom from your homes was probably an interesting experience as well. But you represented us so well. I believe that the reflections that were shared by all three of you echo the sentiments of, across the district, of parents and of teachers and of your fellow administrators. So again, thank you so much. And it was a great presentation, and it represented the unbelievable work that has been going on with our administrators, with our teachers, and our partnerships with our parents. So again, thank you for doing that. I just want to make sure that we recognize that for the three of you. And then that's it. I guess if anybody has any other questions.
Well, and I intended to also offer my thanks for the participation. And actually, Christine O'Neill also has a 3rd grader at North Beverly. And it was interesting how she presented sort of the different challenges at the different age levels and, different approaches. I thought it was really important that the Joint Committee on Education Oversight had a variety of panels today. I would encourage you to seek out the recorded version if you find yourself with some time. It was about 4 hours long. It ranged from Commissioner Riley providing a lot of information to our MASC Executive Director, Glenn Kocher. We, of course, had Beverly's presentation, but we also heard from a more urban district and the more rural districts, as well as the charter schools. So I think that there was just such a wide variety of information, and certainly a proud moment for Beverly to have been able to highlight the Beverly Keeps Learning. I think the clear message was received that our district's preparedness helped with technology, with professional development across the district, and that ongoing professional development that's occurring right now during the building closures. But I think one of the themes that we're overhearing is that it really is about a balance. It's not about pushing out the technology, but making sure we have authentic engagement and we are looking at the social and emotional needs of our students and families. Definitely, there were a lot of highlights that you'll be able to take away from the recording if you weren't able to see it today about resources and their distribution, both within the districts and within the whole state. And realizing that we need to avoid burnout with our educators, with our staff, and with our families. So it's great to be flexible and creative, but we also need to be realistic that it's not a 24/7 job now for our students or our teachers. There were a lot of poignant points about the benefits of real time as well as asynchronous learning. And I appreciate all the discussion about the various tools that districts were using and how we will likely need to pool resources and think about themes for our fall. With that, we had just one other item from the chair. And I just wanted to bring some information to the committee. We have a few new members. We have a lot of returning members, and just make people aware that some of us are receiving anonymous emails, letters, and communications more generally, whether they be from indeterminate Facebook accounts or unacknowledged email accounts or snail mail. And I just wanted to highlight these, especially for the new members, that it can be tempting to either ignore or put too much stock into some complaints or concerns that we receive. And I wanted to say that under federal and state laws, there are some obligations that are required to follow up on anonymous complaints. For instance, if it was OSHA, ADA, HIPAA, bullying, harassment, taxpayer fund fraud or waste. And those are generally fact-based complaints where there's actual facts and things that could be followed up. And we all have an obligation to refer those to our designated city and state departments for following up. Those are called actionable facts. However, if there's some facts or there's opinion-based complaints, I would just caution you all that preferences, decisions, personalities, those types of things do need to be taken with a grain of salt. And that this body should endeavor not to solicit anonymous feedback. So if you do receive something in the mail or slipped under your doormat, it's nearly impossible to redirect those to the appropriate chain of command. We do refer any of our parents or constituents to the appropriate chain of command, whether it be the teacher, the principal, the superintendent's office. So just a strong word of caution that, we want to deal with real people and real issues, and we want to address them appropriately. So I don't think we need to go too much further into that, but understand also that sometimes if there is an issue that we redirect, there's probably personal information that we might not be able to address in these types of settings. So just wanted to remind everyone, common sense is, real people can be directed to real resolution, and, those anonymous letters will just have to figure them out as we go. Okay. With that, we have a few committee reports to get through, and then again, we will be entering executive session and not return to open session at the end of the evening. So, Ms. Visnick, you have a finance and facilities report for us and a couple of actions.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
The Standing Committee on Finance and Facilities last met on April 15th. It was our first online virtual meeting, and we had a few technical difficulties, including but not limited to getting started a few minutes late. BevCam, as usual, was wonderful, and we appreciate their support, especially during our remote meetings. At our meeting, Jean, we often have a presenter, and our presenter at this particular meeting was Jean, and she presented an overview of our facilities, our school closure, our finances, and the next steps, a sliver of which you got to see this evening in Dr. Trochek's presentation. Some of what Jean presented was based on our reopening on May 4th, and it was after our FNF meeting that the governor made the announcement that schools would not, in fact, reopen this year. So again, the 4 areas, the first area was facilities, and a big shout out to the custodial staff that's proactively doing cleaning. They're doing some of the tasks that would normally happen over the summer. The energy management system is on a holiday schedule, and we're hoping that that should result in some net savings over the comparison of if we were in occupied mode. The second item was the district activities that are taking place during the school closure. First and foremost, the food preparation continues, and 2 days a week on, I think everybody knows this, but we'll give this big shout out again, Tuesday and Friday. Each of those days, over 300 students are receiving 3 breakfasts and 3 lunches, and some of those meals are being delivered to the various parks across the city, thanks to our transportation department. So that is, in my mind, a fabulous thing, and I love to jump up and down and give kudos about that. Our tech department continues to try to help get everybody up and going, as we just heard, relative to being able to deliver remote learning, remote instruction, and our administrative offices continue to be in the office, but on a rotation, so that they are minimizing the number of people in the building at a time. So, for instance, payroll comes in on a different day than the accounts receivable. Excuse me. The third item we talked about were budget concerns, and we heard a lot about that at the beginning of this meeting. But we do expect some transfers at the next FNF meeting because, for instance, we can't have a negative balance in any of our revolving accounts, and several of our revolving accounts are not collecting money right now. For instance, we're not collecting kindergarten fees, food services, we're selling way less a la carte. So there's things like that that are going to have funds transferred to cover those deficits. And finally, the fourth item that Jean presented was on what she would be doing next, which again, we've heard a little bit about already, but the bulk of it is to really comb through both the revenues and the expense accounts for deficits and surpluses and figure out how we can try to even those out, because any given expense is usually covered by a revolving account. And so if we don't have the money in those revolving accounts, then we have to do a transfer. All right, so that was kind of the Jean's presentation, a summary of Jean's presentation. It was good. And then we did our normal business of buildings and grounds, revenue and expense report reviews. And finally, for our action items, we have a gifts to schools. So the Standing Committee on Finance and Facilities recommends the acceptance with gratitude of the following gifts to schools. It totals $2,583.79. It's composed of 3 different donations from the high school PTSO, approximately $1,500 for calculators to be ordered, and district-wide from one of our print shops, approximately $90, and from our wonderful community partner, the Cummings, they have staff giving, and they have earmarked $1,000 for elementary music.
I'd like to make a motion to accept those gifts to our schools with gratitude.
Ms. Robinson is seconding.
Miss Robinson, thank you, Karen. And I can facilitate a roll call vote unless there's any questions. Okay, Mayor Cahill?
Yes.
Kimberly Coelho?
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Milady?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. The motion to accept is 7-0. Thank you. And next?
The Standing Committee on Finance and Facilities recommends approval of the following Beverly Public School grants to be accepted. These are not new grants, but rather additional funds in each of 4 different existing grants. Title II Part A has an increase of $1,064. The special education has an increase of $5,687. Early education, special education, early childhood special education has an increase of $83, and our Title I grant has an increase of $801 for a total of $7,635.
I will make a motion to accept the additional grant funding totaling $7,635. Do I see a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Ferretti. And again, by roll call vote in alphabetical order, Mayor Cahill,
Yes.
Kimberly Coelho,
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti,
Yes.
John Malady,
Yes.
Karen Robinson,
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick,
Yes.
and Rachel Abel, yes. We've accepted that 7-0. Thank you.
And our next meeting is next Wednesday night, when we'll have everybody there for a big virtual party.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, the Standing Committee on Curriculum Instruction Student Life. Ms. Ferretti?
Yes, we had, I think, one of our record-long meetings in my tenure, but it was well worth it. We received an overview from all the building administrators on all the accomplishments as well as challenges that are going on in each of the buildings, and it was a fantastic presentation. And I think most notably, Betty Taylor gave some details about everything that they're doing for the graduating seniors, all the plans in motion to make them feel that they're not missing out on certain special things that are happening that they would typically get if we had normal life. But it was just a great presentation. It was long, but it's so fabulous. And Dr. Flaherty, if you have anything to add, I welcome any feedback you have or comment at this point.
I think you did a nice job of highlighting the night. It was really kind of a remote learning showcase, and I thought all the principals did a fabulous job.
Yeah, they did. It was great. It's nice to see that despite the challenges that we're all facing these days, that there's so much good stuff that's going on out there, and we're just so lucky to have these teachers, these administrators, just leading the charge despite the obvious challenges that so many families are facing. So it's a great meeting.
Okay, and we'll look to reconvening in June. For negotiations, as we've alluded to, we had suspended. We do have a meeting posted for tomorrow evening for the subcommittee, and we will discuss that more in executive session. So I'll move along to our next subcommittee, Ms. Ferretti, again with the policy subcommittee.
Yep, so this evening we have the second reading of the 2 policies that we talked about at our last meeting. The first, BCB, and the next is GBEA. So I think I'll just tackle the BCB first. This is the subcommittee had recommended that we revise the nepotism policy to read that the school committee recognizes that nepotism in the school system can be detrimental to the efficient conduct of business. No person shall be employed under circumstances which are in violation of the conflict of interest laws and regulations. The district permits the employment of qualified relatives of school committee members to the extent that such employment does not create a conflict of interest as outlined within the conflict of interest laws and regulations, MGL 268A. In the process of kind of putting this forward, I did a fair amount of research through neighboring communities and found that this type of language embodies the majority of the communities that surround us, which really supports the law that Massachusetts has in place and allows the activity that would be permissible under this law. And it doesn't limit the qualified individuals that may come forth to fill positions, despite that, they may have a relative amongst one of us. So that is the first. I don't know if we want to
let's take them individually.
Yep.
Okay. So this is our second reading of BCB as presented with the track changes edits. For the sake of entering into discussion, are we entertaining a motion this evening?
I don't know if I could make a motion on this, to make a motion to revise the language as I had just stated and what's included in our package.
Sure. Okay, so Ms. Ferretti has made a motion to revise BCB as indicated in the package. Do I have a second? Okay, thank you, Ms. Robinson. Okay. Do we have questions, concerns? Ms. Bisnick, I see your hand raised.
Thank you. I know that we're a new body compared to the previous time we talked about this policy. The previous body had a fairly long and detailed meeting around this policy and whether to set it aside for a very specific employment opportunity. And in that long meeting, several of us shared some very personal, heartfelt stories around why we felt it was important to not change this policy. So one of the examples that I did not give, but I very much enjoyed hearing, was that, for instance, the federal government has a minimum wage, but the state of Massachusetts does something above and beyond that. And so, although the way this revision is written would comply with the Massachusetts law, the way that it's written now, if we were to not revise it, holds our body to a higher standard. And I am all about holding our body to that higher standard. And I said in the last meeting, and I'll say again, I think it's imperative that as elected officials, we make sure we never even hint at the appearance of an impropriety. And if we allow hiring of our own relatives, that can very easily be construed as being inappropriate. So without rehashing everything that was said on that last meeting, and I appreciate the fact that Ms. Robinson and Ms. Ferretti were not in that last meeting, I absolutely do not agree with revising this policy.
I could just interject too, Madam President.
Go ahead, Ms. Ferretti.
Yep, the research that I had done in preparation for our subcommittee meeting, we are among the vast minority in communities that do not have a policy that supports the law that's out there. And I think that if we become a committee that leans towards creating policies that supersede the law, it really muddies our waters in what our intention is. This policy that was approved by the subcommittee, that is recommended for approval by the Committee of the Whole, is what the majority of communities in our neighboring towns have supported. We have a very detailed law in place at the state of Massachusetts, and that's something that I think our policy should certainly lean into And most all of our policies are created in order to support the law, not supersede them. And I think if we're creating policies, we're not in the business of making car seats or paying minimum wage. This is a policy based on employing individuals. And the state of Massachusetts has already addressed that. And most of our policies, as I did all of the research, they support the laws that are already in place. And this is one of those policies. Again, we're in the vast minority in people in other communities that have this policy.
I see Mr. Milady's hand first. I have a comment to make, but go ahead, Mr. Milady first.
Sure. I'm just going to say there's some more pressing issues at hand, and unless other people have anything new to mention, because a lot of people have already said where they stand on this issue, I'd like to encourage our members that it's 10-9, and maybe we should consider taking the vote now.
Okay. Ms. Robinson, quickly.
I didn't have an opportunity to speak, but I did attend that meeting. I watched the meeting. So the community of Beverly is a place where people stay and people like to stay and work. And I just think that, strong community members, people who are in the service-minded individuals, they tend to have families that are service-minded as well and want to serve their communities. So I don't think it's saying anything. I don't think that just giving them an opportunity to apply for a job within the system, it doesn't say that they're going to get the job. It's saying that we trust the people who are going to hire to make the right decision. I would hate to see qualified candidates not even have an opportunity. So that's just something I wanted to add in there.
Sure. From my perspective, I don't want to rehash the prior meeting, but I think I do have concerns with the fact that we are the employer of record for our district and we're signing off on the unit contracts. So I do see that we potentially would have to have, if there were a potential candidate that was the most qualified that was hired, we would potentially have to have certain members excluded from votes and signing agreements. And I think I also had previously expressed my concern about the paying of warrants and some of those other fiduciary responsibilities that we all share. Our district is a little different in that we have a majority of our school committee approve the warrants, except for this exceptional time where we've designated that responsibility to one member. But one of the things that we would need to consider going forward is how we would be able to execute on our fiduciary responsibilities as well as our contractual responsibilities in both negotiating and executing contracts with our bargaining units. And that's one of the areas that causes me a lot of pause. I think that there are a variety of districts that, maybe don't have a pool of resources that's as wide, and certainly understanding particular areas are hard to fill, and hearing what Ms. Robinson's saying about, this is really an opportunity to serve in our community. It's definitely swaying, but I'm just a little hesitant with some of the fiduciary and contractual obligations that we have as members. One other point that I think we had heard at the table in the prior discussion was the fact that people choose not to run for school committee knowing that it would affect the viability of being hired within the district or their spouses or family members being hired within the district. And so if we did entertain a change to this rule, we would need to consider, how that might impact, people's participation in the whole process. Do I see Ms. Ferretti's hand?
I just want to bring up that our current policy does allow for people to run for office despite having individuals employed under the school umbrella. Mm-hmm. And we've dealt in as far as, I don't know how far back it goes, but there have been many situations that you have a school committee member with a immediate family member who does work for the school system, and it does work, under the stipulations that are in place. I don't see much of a difference. This other policy that almost contradicts the first policy does allow for 2 immediate members to be under the same umbrella under the school district. And it's something that we've made work for many, many years. And, it just seems to be contradicting to have a policy that prevents someone after the elected process of an official to have someone join on as under the stipulations of the law, to have someone join on as an employee. But you can have someone run for elected office if someone's already an employee. The situation, the end result is the same. There are laws in place that prevent any misgivings under the nepotism rules. And, those govern any wrongdoings or missteps. And it would be the same going the other way. If we did join the majority of our neighboring communities to adopt a policy that allowed this to go both ways, that, as Mrs. Robinson eloquently said, when you have families that are committed to being involved, sometimes you have dual roles that are intended, and it just doesn't seem fair to negate that and prevent that. And again, reminding that the subcommittee did vote, the majority vote, to recommend that the committee accept this revision of the policy.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands, and I think Mr. Milady was asking to move the question. So if there's no further discussion, are we ready to take a vote? I see heads nodding. I'm going to read the roll in alphabetical order. Mayor Cahill?
Yes.
Kim Coelho?
No.
Kelly Ferretti?
Before I vote, I just noted Ms. Coelho had voted no, but yet she had voted yes in our subcommittee meeting. And I wondered what compelling evidence had come forward between her yes vote at our subcommittee meeting and her no vote at this meeting.
Well, I don't think that's how votes work.
I wasn't sure,
Okay.
like how, I know that if you vote for something or against something in a subcommittee, and then if you change your vote at the committee of the whole.
I think that's permitted in every subcommittee except for negotiations, because in that case we are.
It is permitted. However, there's an underlying statement that states that you.
Okay, I see Ms. Coelho's hand.
I did research a little more that I could change my vote if I disagreed with my original vote. My original vote was after a very long meeting, and I am still a new member. And then I went and took my ethics training again for the 3rd time and reread all the nepotism policies and everything. And I can't vote yes.
Our meeting
on this
was
reading
30 minutes.
Okay.
The subcommittee meeting.
Okay. I think we're taking a roll call vote. I'm sorry we got sidetracked there. Mr. Milady?
No.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
Thank you. Lorinda Visnick?
No.
And Rachel Abel, I also have to say no. I find that we have 1, 2, 3 affirmatives for the negative. So this policy at this time remains unchanged. We do have our attorney who's standing by for executive session. I would ask that we could quickly look at GBEA. And Ms. Ferretti, could you just give the group an overview of the edits that were proposed here from the Policy Standing Committee?
Before we move on to the GBE, I just want to add that there's the second portion of the BCB that was not included in tonight's vote that we'll have to do a first reading of tonight. I feel in light of this vote, when we had our original discussions, we had talked about removing the language following that did allow an exception to the policy. But I feel in light of the majority of this committee's strong feelings that there is a danger of nepotism, that we do need to look at still revising that next section, that this shall not apply to any person with such relationship or relationships who has been regularly employed to the school committee prior to the inception of the relationship, the adoption of this policy, or a school committee's member's selection. Our discussion was to remove that section, and I feel that that's even more prudent at this time, since the majority of this committee feels that the danger of nepotism needs to be above and beyond the law. So that's something that we should table for the next second reading, to remove that completely, so we have no instance for allowing that there's relatives employed.
Can I make a motion that we refer this back to committee for consideration then? I'm not 100% clear on whether we are officially doing a first reading on that strike through. I know that there was administrative error, but can we refer that back to policy and then bring it forward for another first reading with clarity in the documents?
If that's what you wish. I mean, I know that this was discussed in the subcommittee meeting, that if we're modifying that language, that the next body doesn't make sense to keep that.
Okay. We'll take another look at BCB in a future meeting.
I just need to say too, I'm disappointed in the end result of this vote. I feel that we had a good discussion in the subcommittee, and I feel that there's motives that I don't quite understand. This is something, as I said, that research was done, and we are in the vast minority in having a policy that supersedes the law. And it's a slippery slope if that's how we're going to proceed. Okay. With GBEA, it was recommended that we modify the language to remove the reference of school committee, and you have the language in your packets.
Okay, and just for our viewing audience, this is in our staff section of our policy document, the staff ethics conflict of interest. I'll make a motion that we accept the changes to remove the reference to, I'm sorry, there's so much changes. I'm just trying to notice the word differences between the two.
Madam President?
Yes, Ms. Visnick.
The intent, I don't know how clearly it came out, but as a member of the policy subcommittee, I will say the intent was to remove the reference of school committee members out of this particular policy, GBEA, because the entire section G is supposed to be about staff.
I see now where that okay. I was just a little confused because it says it is the policy of the school committee, and I was getting hung up on that. Okay, so to remove the reference to school committee, because
it was referenced, yes, about staff, but included the school committee and.
Okay, so I would recommend the edits to GBEA as written. Do I have a second?
The subcommittee would recommend.
Well, I'm making a motion that the school committee accept these edits today. This is our second reading, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Do we have any discussion or concern about these edits? Looking for
I
hands.
have some concern about voting yes for this one, just in light of the changing thoughts on the BCB policy. And when we discussed them, it was a collaborative discussion that when we changed the GBEA, it was to eliminate confusion and that we would be tightening up the BCB to be more in line with what it is. So now that certain members of Ms. Coelho has decided to change her vote, it changes the impact of the GBEA vote.
Okay, so this is a separate.
It's a
policy.
separate. We discussed
policy.
it in the subcommittee as one topic.
My recollection from the meeting where we had a deeper discussion was that we had noticed that during our massive policy manual updates, we had inadvertently included the word school committee based on some sample language from MASC, and I think this is just an action to correct that inadvertent insertion.
Yeah, I had watched that meeting from home, and that's not what I had taken, that it was an inadvertent. It seemed like it was a conflict in policy, not so much an inadvertent omission.
Addition. Okay.
So even though I was not engaged in that meeting, that seemed to be the topic, that it was a conflict that one would allow while the other did not.
Mr. Milady, are you raising your hand? No. Do we have Ms. Bisnick?
Thank you. I'll just go back to the fact that Section G is about staff and school committee is not about staff. So although the policies can be considered to be linked, from a cleanness point of view, our staff policy should not include mention of the school committee. We have a section in the policy manual that applies to the school committee, and we can put our restrictions on ourselves or our hopes and our goals of how we should behave in that section, and they should not be included in the staff section.
I feel that when this policy was created, though, there was an intention that was obviously trying to be put forward, and the intention is this. In this part, whoever crafted this policy was to allow for this type of employment to unfold using the laws to hold up what, any misgivings on nepotism.
Ms. Freddie, am I hearing that you might want to bring this one back to the subcommittee? Do you want to ask that I withdraw my motion?
We can go forward with a vote on this if that's appropriate. I'm just expressing my my concerns over this one.
Can I get an informal? Are we ready to vote on this one, or are there other people that are wishing that we don't? I can't read your faces. Are we moving forward with the vote? I will call the roll. Okay, Mayor Cahill.
Yes.
Kim Coelho.
Yes.
Thank you. Kelly Ferretti.
No.
John Milady.
Yes.
Karen Robinson.
No.
Lorinda Visnick.
Yes.
And Rachel Abel, yes. Motion has passed with a 5-2. Okay. Thank you very much. Looking at our agenda now, we did have a moment on our agenda for communications from school committee members. I don't know if we want to do that now or we'll take a pass so that we can move on to our final item. Does anyone have communications that they want to share? Go, Ms. Visnick.
Madam President, I want to do a shout out 2 years ago today, and I apologize to everybody because I know we're on a crunch time here and we still have an executive session. 2 years ago today, our community lost Doc Wiley, and I have Endicott College graduate as of, I think, Friday. And I can't help but wonder how he would be helping us get through this time. He is a fantastic community leader. And one of Doc's favorite quotes was to remember the past, appreciate where we are, and dream about what we can be. And I think that that's a fantastic reminder for all of us. And I thought it appropriate to bring that up this evening in his honor, given that we are meeting on the anniversary of the day we lost a fantastic man.
Hear, hear. Okay. With that, the chair is going to move to convene executive session pursuant to the Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, for the following purposes. Purpose number 7, to review and approve the minutes of the previous executive session minute for April 29, 2020. And purpose 3, to discuss strategy with respect to and in preparation for collective bargaining with the Beverly Teachers Association Unit A, because an open discussion may have detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the committee. And we will not return to open session. I will need a second.
So moved.
Oh, I saw Karen Robinson's fingers. She beat everyone to the unmute. And I will take a roll call vote. Mayor Cahill?
Yes.
Kim Coelho?
Yes.
Kelly Ferretti?
Yes.
John Malady?
Yes.
Karen Robinson?
Yes.
Lorinda Visnick?
Yes.
Okay, Rachel Abel, yes. We are now moving into executive session. Please let me know if you have any trouble with the links. I believe I need to arrive at that meeting first before anyone will be allowed in, but I will go there right now. Thank you very much. Thank you, BevCam. We appreciate it as always, and everyone stay safe. Have a good night. See you all on the other side.
Ciao.